So if you want to hit Legend this new year, these are the top 5 best decks to do it with, and the first one is going to be Shockspitter Hunter, which should surprise nobody. Essentially, on release, this deck was so broken it needed to be hotfix nerfed within the first 3 days. It nerfed the total damage and the speed of this deck, but then Blizzard, in its infinite wisdom, destroyed Prince Renathal and made 40 HP decks irrelevant, and then also nerfed the speed of the other combo decks, which kind of indirectly reverted the nerfs to this deck. Yes, it was nerfed, but then all of the other things that were beating it got nerfed, which rose it back to the top, and now it has like a 56% win rate and is once again a super duper interactive, fun deck to play. The next deck on the list is going to be Big Spell Mage, which is the only mage deck on this list because I try my best to not repeat classes, and I will say Aggro Mage is still good, but this deck has a higher win rate and is played more often than Aggro Mage. It'll probably still be in the description, don't worry, but this is the deck I'm showcasing because the mana cheat is just ridiculous. When you're able to play a Drakefire Amulet or a Rune of the Archmage turn 7, 6, sometimes 5 if you're able to go second or get a Mailbox Dancer out, you get so much tempo your opponent can't deal with it. Then you activate it again with Grey Sage Parrot, pair that with the fact that you have infinite late game scaling with Magister Dawngrasp if you go against a control deck, and this is just basically unbeatable for so many things. You also have great armor gain with the Deepwater Evoker, which helps against combo decks, and you have a decent amount of freeze with Amplified Snow Flurry, Nightcloak Sanctum, and ways to increase their mana cost. The next deck on the list is going to be Pure Paladin, which is not only super simple to play, but it's also extremely strong. The idea is pretty simple. You want to try to put some 1 and 2 drops out on the board, and then you want to pump up their stats. You have Alliance Bannerman, Seal of Blood, which is actually a just broken card, as well as the Invigorating Sermon to pump up your board and future minions. And then the other win condition of this game, if tempo is not enough, is you want to play Order in the Court around turn 3 or 4 to draw Blood Crusader on curve, so you can play Countess on 6 and then win with the invitations in the late game. This deck is again very simple to play. You just go for tempo. If that doesn't work, win with Countess, and that's basically it. So the next deck on the list is going to be Frost Death Knight, which is basically everything you could ever want from a kind of aggro fast combo deck. The idea is simple. You got a ton of mana cheat, you got a ton of damage, you got ways of duplicating damage with the Lady Death Whisper as well as the spell damage. You've got good draw. You have a couple of decent late game cards like the Overseer as well as Frostnorn's Fury to lock your opponent out of the game or deal with the potentially annoying board. And then you've got insane burst that can come down around turns 6, 7, 8, or 9, something around there, which can just win you the game. Especially with the nerf to the 40 HP decks, this has really become a dominant force in the meta. And the last deck on the top 5 part of this list, I have honorable mentions still to come, is Curse Implock. The idea behind this deck is simple. You want to aggress your opponent early with the Imp package and then finish him off with the Curse package. This deck has literally not changed in the past, like, 4 months. It's been strong since its release, so I would highly recommend trying it out. It's not too expensive. It's pretty simple to play. There are a lot of videos and guides on it if you want to learn how to play it pretty quickly. I have a lot of them myself, or you can check out somebody else. This is probably the best deck to get started in because it'll be good against everything. If you need to go faster, you could take out maybe a couple of the slower cards and curse things to put in a couple more early game cards. And if the meta slows down, you can take out maybe a couple of imp cards and put in a couple of extra ways to generate more curses or do damage in the late game. It's a very flexible deck. I would highly recommend it. So next on the list is 6th place. Basically the thing that if I had one more spot would have been on this list, and it's Evolved Shaman. The only reason it's not on this list is because of the fact that it lacks a little bit of consistency. You kind of need to get good RNG with Primordial Wave or Muck Pools. You need to draw a Gold Gyro relatively early on to get full value out of this deck. But if you are able to get those things, this deck is borderline unstoppable. So if you're okay playing a cheaper deck, to be fair, you only really need 2 legendaries, but a cheaper deck that's a little bit less consistent, this is definitely the deck for you. Just don't get frustrated if you low roll a couple of games in a row. It's going to happen from time to time. So the next 2 decks on the list are going to be the high skill cap decks, which basically mean if you spend the time to learn how to play them well, they will have the highest win rate for you, but they're very hard to learn how to play in the beginning. And those 2 decks are going to be Miracle Rogue and Quest Demon Hunter, which in top 1000 Legend are the best in the game, and have a 54.5% and 54% win rate respectively. These decks had a combined total of 6 nerfs in the last patch, with Miracle Rogue getting 3 and Quest Demon Hunter also getting 3, and yet they are still faster and more consistent than Shockspitter Hunter, as well as Frost Death Knight, if you know what you're doing, which just goes to show how broken these cards were to begin with. Now, I will say there is more counterplay now. Aggro decks are able to destroy these decks a little bit faster because it'll take them about 1 to 2 more turns to actually win the game. Quest Demon Hunter no longer has as much lifesteal after the nerf to Unleash Fel, so if you can set up lethal before turn 6 or by turn 6, you can still beat them, which is nice, but they're still arguably the best decks in the entire game. So the last deck on the list, which is going to be just my own personal honorable mention, is going to be Blood Death Knight. The reason I like this deck so much is because it's just got a lot of disruption and brings me back to the control decks that I used to really like. There are really not that many good control decks out there, and I like running the 40 card version. You can run a 30 card version if you want. I just like having the extra space to run some tech cards, right? We're able to run disruption like Sylvanas, Theotar, Alexandros, Mutanus, and Patchwork all at the same time with Okani, and then we also are able to tech in a couple of other cards like the Corrupted Ashbringer, which can either A, be some good direct damage, some good life gain, or some good removal, depending on what you need. You have about 10 to 12 Discover cards, so you're never really going to run out of resources. And then I run a couple of extra early game cards like the Noxus, Cadaver, and Corner to just help me against aggro decks, and in the late game have some silence to stop some pumped up minions. Overall, it's just a really fun deck. I've always loved control, and I hope you guys enjoy the video. I hope you guys hit legend this year. Have a good one, and I'll see you when I start playing games.